Hi, I'm Will for Sound on Sound at the AES show in Los Angeles with Eric Valentine, engineer, producer extraordinaire. He also owns UnderToneAudio, which is why we're here actually. UnderToneAudio, the UnFairchild, this thing here. Based on a Fairchild, obviously.
Yeah.
But what is it about the UnFairchild which makes it so unfair?
Well, what really makes it unfair is the combination of its affordability and flexibility. It's got a whole host of new features that Fairchilds have never had before that you would really expect to have in a modern compressor. And we really focused all of our energy on, the main audio path to make sure that that's preserved and that will really sound the same as an original Fairchild. And there were things about the original design that were just unnecessarily complicated and inefficient. And it just made the whole thing, whether you're looking for an original one or any of the other recreations that have been done, just kind of unobtainable because it's so wildly expensive. And this one we're going to be able to sell for under 10 grand, and it sounds amazing. It sounds like an original Fairchild and has all of these incredible new features that you want when you're working on modern stuff. So that makes it unfair.
So it's worth mentioning that the original Fairchild is many times that amount of money. I mean, to some of the people watching, 10 grand might seem like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of Fairchilds, that is not.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to see them, being sold for $50,000 or $60,000 in original one.
Ridiculous.
Is totally insane. There is no compressor worth $50,000. No compressor sounds that good. It's just ridiculous.
Can you talk us through some of the features then that have been improved? Any additions to the original Fairchild?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've used quite a few Fairchilds over the years, and I think it's also important to know that every single one that I've used sounded different. There really isn't a Fairchild sound. Each one is a little bit different. They're all in general in sort of the same sort of Very-Mu, that's the type of tube that it uses for the compression, in that same category, but they vary pretty wildly from unit to unit. And with all of them, the thing that always drove me crazy is that there was no bypass on the thing. So you could never compare with and without the thing on, without doing it externally. So there's a real bypass on this. There's also fine trim controls for left and right level. That also wasn't available on the original Fairchild. You weren't able to fine trim the balance of the left and right. So if you have it on your mix and it's not exactly right, you'd have to use an external fader or something to balance. So it's simple stuff like that makes it way, way easier to use. So left and right will be, you can tweeze it in so it's just perfectly balanced to the 10th of a dB. We have a much better balancing circuit for making sure that the Very-Mu tubes are balanced properly within themselves. So they're really compressing in the most musical way. You just null out a meter and it's super easy to do, anybody can do it. Then we've added, beyond the original 6 Fairchild presets, so you have those that sound like the original unit, we added these variable control presets where it puts you in a section of the unit where you actually have independent control over the attack and release, like you'd want to have on a modern compressor. So you can do that. There's a sidechain insert, so you can do sidechain processing if you want. A lot of people like to take out low frequencies when they're compressing so the kick drum doesn't get compressed too much or something like that.
Yep.
And then we also added the possibility of doing feed forward or feedback compression. The original design is inherently feedback, where the compression is triggered from the output of the unit. And so as it's compressing, it sort of eases off the compression and it sort of regulates itself and it smooths out the compression. It's one of the things that's very cool about it. It's a very smooth compression, but feed forward compression, where the incoming signal just goes straight to the Very-Mu tubes, is a really cool, aggressive sound. It's like you really hear the compression, and it makes the Fairchild sound like a whole other device that you really haven't heard before. It's more similar to a tube version of a DBX 160 or something. It's really cool, aggressive compression. The other thing that we added now is there's a proper stereo link, which the originals didn't really have. There's also MS modes. There's 2 different MS modes. So you can either compress mono and stereo information independent from each other, and so the dynamics of those would be controlled totally individually, which can be really useful when you're cutting vinyl. That was what it was originally called on the original Fairchild. They called it lateral and vertical, which are the 2 different orientations of how vinyl is cut for stereo.
Yep.
So you can do that, and then there's another mode where it is doing MS processing, but they're linked together. So it always compresses the mono and stereo the same, but you can control how much it's triggering off of the mono signal versus the stereo signal. So in certain stuff, you could have it where it's compressing everything uniformly, but it's only being triggered off of mono stuff, which would be more like the kick drum and the snare drum and the bass guitar, and so stuff that's panned out left and right, like guitars or keyboards or whatever, wouldn't really influence the compression. Or you can do it the other way around and have all the stereo stuff compress everything together. And it's a really cool effect for certain things. It gives you a kind of like punchier compression because it's really just reacting to the drums and stuff like that. The other thing, there's a DC threshold control that interacts with the main threshold control that allows you to vary the character of the compression. So with different combinations, you can essentially make for a higher ratio in the compression. So in the original Fairchild, it was this preset that was done inside the unit.
Yeah, sure.
And so you would just calibrate it and set it and leave it alone. We decided to bring it to the front panel so you have more control over the character of the compression. So that's really the overview of the whole thing. All the stuff that we've added, and
Cool. And when's it going to be available then?
In November. We should have production quantities ready to roll out the door in November for people to take home.
Great. Thanks
Start
a lot, Eric.
compressing.
Cheers.
All right, thanks.